Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for the technical difficulties there. I was accessing a different Zoom link, but we've got it figured out now, and we're ready to get rolling. So, welcome to our workplace accessibility and assistive technology presentation. This is put on by the West Michigan Disability Awareness Resource Team, otherwise known as DART. So who is the Disability Awareness Resource Team? So the DART team is made up of Michigan Rehabilitation Services, the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, West Michigan Works, West Michigan Veterans Coalition and the VA, Disability Advocates of Kent County, and Disability Network West Michigan. We have our logo over here on the right of the slide. It's a target with all of our various logos in it. And then we have our collective goal at the bottom, which is to promote and support the inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce. So our objectives today are to talk about workplace accommodations, provide some resources for employers, talk about what is assistive technology and why it's important. We're going to have a local employer's perspective. We have Carolyn DeVos here from Barfly, who's going to share some experiences with us. And then we're going to talk about some existing technology, some real life examples, and then we'll share a little call to action at the end. So we'll just start with the definition of assistive technology. So an assistive technology device is any item, piece of equipment, or product or system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. This can include everyday objects, adaptations to existing products, and accessibility features built into existing products, as well as services, tools, or devices specifically designed for use by people with disabilities. These can be used to assist with personal, everyday tasks, as well as allow individuals to fully participate in their communities and be successful in employment. So I did just want to give a brief introduction to Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act 2. So that Title I applies to private employers with 15 or more employees, and it also applies to all state and local units of government, regardless of how large they are. It prohibits private employers, state and local governments, employment agencies, and labor unions from discriminating against qualified individuals with disabilities in job application procedures, hiring, firing, advancement, compensation, job training, and other terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. So employers are required to provide reasonable accommodations to qualified individuals with disabilities to perform the essential functions of a job. Accommodations are different for each individual, but may often include assistive technology, and accommodations are the responsibility of the employer to provide. You'll learn today about some resources to assist you in providing those accommodations. And with that, we're going to move into an interview here with Carolyn DeVos, who's the Human Resources Manager at Barfly. I'll turn it over to Trina.
Okay, thank you. I'm Trina Edmondson, Workforce Development Program Manager at Disability Advocates. I'm going to do a quick interview with Carolyn DeVos. Hi, Carolyn. Thanks
Hi.
for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about your experience as an employee and HR person at Barfly?
Yeah, of course. So our company, Barfly, if you're not familiar with us, we own different restaurants in Michigan and a few outside of Michigan as well. So I've been with Barfly for about 7 years now. I started off as an assistant and moved up to now serving as the HR manager. I oversee a variety of topics, like I'm sure many of you do, but employee relations, including leave and accommodations and safety, is a large focus of my role. And as someone who personally requires accommodations, it's been really important to me and our whole team to create a system where we could allow employees to do their best work and feel confident and respected. So we created our accommodation process about 5 years ago now. Our VP of HR, Ellen, was a contact and had a relationship with Trina. So we utilized her to poke any holes in our draft and make sure it was inclusive and that it was going to really serve the needs of the people that we were working with.
Great, thank you. So what we really want to hear about is how did you create this process? What are the steps that you took? And what was the, how did job descriptions play a part in that process creation?
Yeah, so we created this process because we saw a need and we wanted to be prepared to be able to meet that need. It was really motivated by myself and our VP to really uphold the value that our company has of being very inclusive. Job descriptions certainly played a part in that. All of our job descriptions include the physical and environmental requirements of the position. And this is something that we revisit often because we know that, especially in our restaurants, it can be a little of an intense physical and environment. So we often look to ensure that this is correct. So the job descriptions is something that we have available when anyone applies to a position with our company. And throughout the accommodation process, this is something that we provide to the employee to give to their doctor when they're requesting the doctor's input for an accommodation. We all have assumptions of what a line cook does, or a dishwasher, or a server in the guest facing, but we want to ensure that their doctor is understanding exactly what the environment would be like for this person.
Very nice. So can you talk a little bit about what the actual position or the tasks of that position that you were able to accommodate, what kinds of things worked and what didn't? Because, you know, we can always still learn from our mistakes with what didn't work.
Absolutely. So we've most commonly applied accommodations to our home office positions. That can be anything from lighting. We've done that for a few of our employees that have some vision issues. We have also applied remote work options, areas where they can be in working where there's very low stimulation. So those are some of the specific accommodations that we've applied for our home office. For our restaurants, that is certainly more of a challenge. It's just, it's the physical aspects are more strenuous and the environments are not very conducive to variances from that baseline position needs. But that's when we've been able to get creative, look for outside resources like, you know, Trina or the JAN, the Job Accommodation Network, which is a website that you can use. So we've found options through that. We've also just asked the employee that needs the accommodation to be a partner with us and try to find those resources. And we've found things like doing sign language education, posters, a variety of different things. Another thing that I also want to point out is we are especially aware in the last few years that not all accommodations are based strictly on a physical need. So many of our demographic has mental health considerations that we've applied accommodations for. Really being flexible with any request or disability related comment as a need for follow-up and possible application of our process has really served us well in you know, being proactive and having those conversations early before things escalate. But we certainly have had our challenges. We do have a demographic at our restaurants that have a really wide option of positions outside of our company that could meet their individual needs. So there's some that are starting their first job with us, or that this is a part-time position for them. So we do see often that people leave their position with us for one that would fit their needs better. But we continue to just have that conversation to try to see if there's possibly a position change or, another area of the restaurant, such as the kitchen, is pretty unavoidably hot. So we often will move people into the front of house to a guest facing position if the heat or pace of the kitchen is, aggravating their needs. And then it's good to point out too, another challenge that we face is we have had employees that just do not want to go through the accommodation process. Instead, they just want flexibility whenever asked. And while we naturally offer a flexible schedule and position designation, we really have had to insist that some employees go through the official process just to ensure that we're meeting our legal obligations to provide a safe work environment. We're meeting our legal obligations under the ADA, and that our employees have this documentation so that they can understand exactly what their options are.
That's great. Very nice. I'm glad you're utilizing the Job Accommodation Network too. That's something that we preach a lot. It's very helpful. So have you had any experience with computer technology?
Not a ton. We do have someone that has some visual needs, and he actually works in our IT department. So he actually found the accommodation that he needed for himself all on his own and didn't involve me in it, but that's okay. I was happy that he was able to find something that made his work better and easier for him.
Yeah, great. So with that, would Barfly be open to having somebody come in to do any kind of assessment if the need arose for some technology from the computer?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things you have to embrace in any of these processes is it really is a partnership between you and the employee and the manager and the experts in the field. So we have had consultants come in for ergonomics in our home office, and through our workers' comp company, we've had a consultant come in and look at our brewing operation most recently, and just look for ways that we can make it a safer environment, even outside of specific accommodations.
Great. So do you have any advice for the employers that are attending in how they can create or maybe even improve on the accommodation process that they have already? I thank you too for sharing yours with us. We're going to share that out to the other employers that are attending as well. It's very simple, straightforward, just a few steps, and it even includes what the responsibilities for the manager are. That is awesome. So do you have any advice for employers seeking to create a accommodations process?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have a process in place already, get it in place before you need it. The better prepared you are to meet the needs of those employees, the smoother the process is going to go. Also, in my experience, many employees have had emotions connected to their needs, and any scrambling on your part to figure out what to do next is really just going to add to that stress. And then in line with that, listen and offer empathy when it's appropriate. So really, this process is a partnership. Both parties are participating and finding solutions, prepared to ask questions, and then follow through on what you offer. I encourage our managers to be very thoughtful about what they say from both an ethical and a legal standpoint. So we don't overpromise things, or we don't ask for information that we're really not privy to, like diagnoses or treatments or things like that. And with that, train your managers. I've really tried to train our managers to think of those, to have sort of these set of light bulbs So when there's comments or there's a word that someone uses, whether in a conversation with them or with someone else, that goes off for them and they realize, oh, I need to partner with Caroline because this could be an accommodation process that we need to go through. So even role playing through some of those conversations, because they can sometimes be a little sensitive. And so making sure that our managers have some comfort in, you know, this isn't their first time having a conversation like that. Another thing that I always like to point out and highlight during this is this really, again, I've said the word multiple times, it is a partnership. That's why you'll see in my example, we do outline the expectations of the employee as well. We need the employee to be a participant in this for this to work, to be a good communicator, to follow through on gathering information and actually using the accommodation that we're applying. So we also have highlighted for our employees that we still are going to have normal performance expectations. That's the reason for the accommodation, so that they can perform their job at the same, you know, baseline as everyone else. And then this process does not remove baseline standards that any normal employer would have a reasonable right to expect. So the success of this really relies on everyone being a willing participant. The other thing that I haven't mentioned too is have an evaluation step built in. It's really important that you know, there's some evaluation, whether that's 1 to 3 months after the accommodation has been applied. Accommodations are not always a one and done process, so they'll require adjustments and checking in and seeing if they're working out, seeing if it's still needed, and then ensuring that what is put in place, that what you invested in is actually meeting the needs of that employee. So I would say those are some of my advice, and listen more than you speak sometimes, and just, yeah, be willing to be open and creative and use your resources like DART.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So very important points, being sensitive to the needs. Very good. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Carolyn?
And you can contact me afterwards too. I'll make sure to share my email. I really, like I said, I have a personal connection to accommodations in the workplace, so I am very passionate about it, and I am happy to help anyone or just talk about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. So if you don't have any questions, does anybody have a scenario that they'd like to share, an experience that you have had, or maybe there's a scenario of something happening now that you'd like a little advice on?
Charlene did also ask in the chat, where do you advertise to get your talent?
So we utilize Indeed often, and then we also have an applicant tracking system called Talent Brief. So that posts on a variety of different organizations such as Google and Snag a Job and things like that. And we have our full job description, including those physical and environmental, you know, parts of it, all listed on those.
And then Christine has her hand raised. Christine?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I am not an employer. I'm a mother of a person with disabilities who has he's very high functioning in his 20s. And so visibly, you can't see that he has mental disabilities, very high anxiety, processing issues. So because of brain damage in different areas, he doesn't process information, and he has visual disabilities, but besides that, I just have some input regarding being on the other side of the spectrum of the employer. I have gone through MRS in Muskegon to get my son help with job opportunities. And I find that for him, the anxiety, and he has depression as well, but the anxiety and the frustration that it causes him to go through that process alone just to get help is very debilitating for him. He'd rather give up than continue the process because he's very impatient. So he struggles to even get through that process. I think we've gone through at least 2 different times. So right now he currently cannot work because of his medical issues until he's cleared medically to try and go back to work. But so even to get through that process, to even get help, to be employed and go through that process, I think there are challenges that could be addressed there. I made some notes off Ms. DeVos's information that were very helpful about documentation options for the employee, written expectations of the job. My son personally needs written lists. He doesn't read well because of his visual impairment. So verbal recordings, possibly for instructions, would be something that would be super helpful. And again, it makes it difficult because of his processing issues. It's easier for me to verbalize his needs than it is for him. And so to give you an example, if there's anything medically that changes, if he starts having a medical issue, he doesn't feel good in any way, something changes, you need to communicate that to me so I can explore what's going on, take you to the doctor, whatever. He doesn't even remember to do that. So he would go 3 months. He might tell me his back hurts, but he failed to tell me he got in an accident. He doesn't even link the fact that they may be related. So, or most recently, he went months with having mini stroke symptoms, facial palsy, facial paralysis, and different things. So once I do find out all that information, it's all in its time factor to process. Well, how long is that? It's always 2 or 3 months. So you really never know how long he's been having those issues. So just those needs and the evaluation step in place is super helpful, I think, because for review and adjustments, because again, my son might have issues that he's keeping internally with what's going on with his employer. And even though I would instruct him when I find out about it, hey, you need to go to your supervisor, you need to talk about it with your employer so they can understand what you're going through or where he's struggling. So that's very difficult for him. And most people, just by talking to him, would not even see his disabilities. You know, they might see it after they start observing him working, but still the compassion is not there, not so much with employers, but I found for his 12 years of schooling was horrendous. Absolutely. The abuse that he endured and that I endured watching and trying to struggle with trying to even get his education for 12 years was absolutely horrific. So he's been through a lot of trauma physically and mentally. And he wants to so much be out in the workforce. So.
So yeah, it sounds like maybe he would do better, do you think, with a repetitious kind of a job? Something that you do the same thing over and over, or no?
You know, that'd be something he'd have to go in and probably be reevaluated for,
Mhm.
because, you know, yes, with some flexibility, you know, but I just wanted to throw those things out there from personal experience.
Yeah,
The
that's
need for
wonderful.
the need for some of that stuff that might be overlooked, even when a person with disabilities goes through MRS to get help, let alone getting actually in the workforce. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the check-ins, go ahead.
I can note, and thank you for sharing all of that, Christine. I really appreciate hearing that perspective. I can certainly reflect on a few instances in which it isn't always physically present. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, like you mentioned, and feel comfortable speaking up and saying, I need help with this, or this isn't going the way that I want it to. So that's why it's so important to have these processes already in place and have them be something you talk about often. And
Mhm.
you know, as an employer, ensuring that all the employees know that there isn't just a can you do it or you can't. There are, you know, flexibility, and we're
Absolutely.
here to help them. Yeah.
I almost think that employers should have a person dedicated to go and follow up with those people that have those disabilities, to actually, eh, as a certain job, a person that's just, you know, that advocates for those people throughout the workforce.
Mhm. Yeah, because we do have some employees that don't even realize that they can get an accommodation. They don't,
Right.
maybe
Right.
they have not received a diagnosis for any disability, but they're still having challenges.
Correct.
So that's why having this process available is so important.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question. Um, I'm Ashley. I'm actually a speech language pathologist with Rehab Without Walls. We're a home and community therapy program. We mainly serve individuals with brain injury and spinal cord injury. And I just started getting into assistive technology. We service pediatric to geriatric. So our spectrum is pretty wide and all over the state of Michigan. I guess the thing that I'm wondering is like, how do we, because we do have a lot of teenagers that are working at their first job, and then even folks that are maybe older that want to get back into the workforce. So we're doing a lot of these accommodations kind of internally, but like what kind of conversations and like who should we be going to kind of help our patients feel confident and empowered with going to, whether that's human resources or you know, somebody else to kind of find out what accommodations they qualify for. I actually just had an unfortunate situation with one of my clients, which it was her first job. And she had mentioned that she, you know, is recovering from a brain injury and participates in therapy on a weekly basis, and ended up getting fired after 2 days because she just wasn't fast enough for the job duties. And I just wish that would have went differently, because I was willing to work with the employer and kind of helping advocate for some needs. So just trying to look at what I should have done differently or who I should have went to start.
In my experience, and I can only speak for our company in particular, and then others that I've spoken to, typically human resources is the best resource. Mean to see resources twice. Usually they're the best person to go to. Some larger companies also have a specific safety person. And the point where I would pursue that in cases that I've experienced, if they're coming into the workforce with the need for accommodation, is after that contingent job offer has been made. So before they start, but after they're offered the job, that's sort of that great window where the employer wouldn't be concerned or shouldn't be concerned about an ADA, violation, because they've already offered that person the job, but they haven't started yet, so they can start exploring any needs that they would have. That would be my advice.
And I know Disability Advocates does have a workshop that we do for people who are either out of the workforce for a while and not really sure what kind of work they can do or accommodations they might need. And we do talk about those kinds of things based on that specific disability and barrier. So that is something that might consider having people come through our workshop to learn about those things ahead of time before they even, get out there and start looking for the job. So do you have anything like that, Brad or Lisa? For the Muskegon area?
Ours is more kind of peer-based. We have a lot of, Brad can probably speak more to our employment services. I can speak to the fact that Centers for Independent Living, including Disability Advocates of Kent County and ourselves, Disability Network West Michigan, are staffed predominantly by people with disabilities. So I think one of our assets that we can offer is a lot of almost informal peer support, where we can, we've been there, we are working, we've overcome or dealt with barriers ourselves. So I think that's a valuable asset that we have to offer, in addition to working closely with MRS and providing some pre-employment services to help people with disabilities get ready for the workforce.
And so you were mentioning things like on-the-job experience, and is that what you were talking about, Trina?
Well, yeah, that can be part of it. I'm talking more like the employment readiness, where, we do talk about resumes and interviewing, but it's a group setting. It's a small, safe environment. And because we are going to talk about sensitive issues, and just to help people prepare themselves for how to talk to that employer when they do get that job, and how do I ask for that accommodation. So there is training available out there for people with disabilities to be more confident and comfortable with that whole situation.
Yeah, so at Disability Network West Michigan, I think a lot of that work happens more individually, one-on-one with our employment navigation staff. And at our CIL, at least, we don't place people in employment really. We help them build the skills to be ready for employment. Typically, that's again working with Michigan Rehabilitation Services or BSBP, whoever it might be, to make sure that they're prepared for that. And then they can do some on-the-job experience, making sure that it's a good fit for them, and then they have support through that whole thing as well.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we can move on to some assistive technology examples. All right, and first is Trina.
Okay, so we're getting onto the resources that we promised that are already built into your computers and facilities. So I'm going to start with speech recognition. That has been around for a long time. Apple has always had it. So your MacBooks and iPhones all have Drag and Dictate in them, and that works really well. There's also a program that you can purchase through like Best Buy. It's called Dragon Naturally Speaking. That is an option. Then there is also in your PC, Microsoft has a very good, they have improved upon it over the years a lot. So it's just speech recognition. If you go into the settings, and type in speech, it will pop right up, and it's pretty easy to train. The one thing that you need to know about that, as well as the Dragon Naturally Speaking, if you purchase it, that you're going to need a good headset with microphone. Now, the one that comes with Naturally Speaking usually is not, it doesn't work as well as it needs to work. So I always recommend people get a good headset with microphone if they want to have the best effectiveness of the software. So the other good thing about the one in the Microsoft program is that you can have multiple profiles. So the way we work today, a lot of times we're remote now. Maybe you share an office with somebody else. That could mean you're sharing a computer. Well, two people could have their own profile on one computer, and there's multiple profiles that could be done. So that's just an added plus that you don't really get with the other, the one that you would have to purchase. So I have a quick little story about how speech recognition has improved and helped in the workplace. So I had an employer come to me who has a longtime employee who uses a wheelchair, and they've made physical environment accommodations for them, and things have been going good. Well, things happen, things change. There was an added task to the department. So this is a freight scheduling company. So there's a lot of talking on the phone and typing at the same time. And when they added this extra task, which is data entry, and it was something that the whole department would share, they would just rotate through. When it came time for this person to perform that task, he was just too tired from the all day of typing, and his arms and hands would get too weak and he couldn't do that extra task. So we went in and looked at the environment and suggested that they get a speech recognition program and try that out for him. So that's exactly what they did. Their IT department looked it up. They already had it in there. They set it up with them. We gave them a couple hours of training, because you do have to train this to your voice. And then we ended up through that training discovering that, you know, when you're doing speech recognition, you have to tell it when to stop typing. Well, he doesn't want to tell his customer to stop. So we put in a little toggle switch so that when he doesn't want it to type, he can just flip it off with his thumb or finger. And so that was able to save him enough energy to be able to perform that extra task. But at the same time, everybody in the department got it because it improved productivity so much that they just got it for everybody. And it just helped the company be more successful and do more work. So it was good. For a person with a disability, can help everybody. So that's what I have on speech recognition. I think Dan has more to talk about on other types of disabilities.
Yeah, so my name is Dan Mitchell. I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor and teacher with the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. So, really what I want to talk about today is just some of the resources, for individuals that might have writing or spelling challenges, any kind of documentation that's needed. And so, the first slide you see here is actually taken from the JAN, or the Job Accommodation Network. Thanks again, Carolyn, for that plug. And, talking about that, I think that's one of our most sought after resources that we use as professionals. And the idea is that we hope that, our support and, your workers' understanding of their needed accommodations will help. It's definitely not expected that, you as the employer, but it is really a partnership. So I don't need to read through this slide, but really, if we're looking at, individuals with writing and spelling challenges, a big part of this definitely is making sure that those expectations are clarified. So if somebody isn't sure what needs to be, in any kind of written correspondence, that's something that can definitely be worked through, coming up with different templates, looking at maybe forms. And, the folks at the table here are definitely here to help with some of those things as well. So, and then also utilizing some of that speech recognition software, some of the free or add-on resources. But there are also other resources that maybe, or, there's different upgrades and that kind of thing. So it really depends on the need, and I guess, the severity of that need when we're looking at some of these programs. So we've got John here. John works for a nonprofit. He assists individuals, with, various tasks for a nonprofit. A lot of his job tasks is using written correspondence, whether that's case documentation, emails, different types of communications. Some of the challenges again was, what kind of information needs to be in there, maybe providing some examples or some samples, or clarifying those expectations. And then some of the solutions that we implemented, in this case was some job aids, so checklists to help to make sure that, when he met with customers, that all the necessary objectives were met. We adjusted some of the Microsoft grammar settings, and I'll talk about, Microsoft Editor in a moment here, but you can use predictive text, to predict, and then that takes away from some of the time and having to, implement different emails. It learns, how you as a writer write, and then if there are common things that you say, then it'll actually, spit it out, and all you have to do is hit the tab button, and it'll actually, provide that, a similar response to an email and that kind of thing. We also did use the speech recognition. So, for individuals with, writing challenges, sometimes it's having a really hard time thinking of how to structure things. They know in their head what needs to be said or how to say it, and maybe sometimes it might be easier to have a conversation, but in this case, just getting it all out and then, going through and structuring the email after the fact was really effective for, for this individual. So that's my example, and I'm going to talk a bit about the resources. So the first resource is the Microsoft OneNote Immersive Reader. It's really helpful. You do have to have Microsoft 365 or a Microsoft perpetual license to be able to use it. So it separates a lot of the things. You can have the immersive reader actually read back to you, which is also a setting that you can change within Microsoft Office. A lot of folks, it's called read aloud. You can do that in Microsoft Outlook. You can use it in all the other Microsoft programs, but specifically immersive reader is really helpful. It's really helpful in focusing. You can, identify nouns. You can, change the verbs. You can also, block out and only highlight and go line by line. So there's a lot of different things that, can be done so that, folks are able to easier read and, comprehend information. Everybody, I would imagine, gets that little red line, right? When you're writing, if you, mistype something. In recent years, the Microsoft Office Editor has, really made a lot of gains. I don't know if you know, but you can actually go in the settings, and I think there's like 80 settings that you can, change the clarity. Do you want it to, highlight if something is informal or not? I mean, sentence fragments, missing words. I would say that, you know, the next program that I'm going to talk about is a little more effective in, you know, using the writer's voice and, you know, more of, you know, where the editor program is really more for editing. So it does touch on some of the clarity and, you know, concisiveness and formality. But I think the next program that I'm going to talk about does that a bit better and will actually give you an example of something else. So, and that program is called Grammarly. They do have an app on your phone. You can get the premium version for $30. And the premium version does do a bit better job at actually providing some of the examples, but they will actually, and there is an add-on through Microsoft Office with Grammarly too. So, you know, the links are embedded in the presentation itself, and as well as in the resource page. So what I really like about Grammarly is they do a lot more on the style side of things. And again, not just looking at the editing and the predictive text. It also, you know, provides different recommendations on writing styles, which can be really helpful for folks as well. So I'm going to let Dr. Joe Todd talk a bit about different apps and settings for individuals with visual impairments. I think this is actually. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Lisa.
No, it doesn't matter. So, thank you. My name is Lisa Sullivan. I work with Disability Network West Michigan. We service Egan, Mason, Oceana, Newaygo, and Lake counties. We're one of 16 centers for independent living in Michigan, of which Disability Advocate County is another. And I'm kind of here today to talk about situations, for the most part, up until now, we've talked about assistive technology related to computer use. So whether you're on your Microsoft Windows or your Apple computer, but there are often jobs where you don't have a computer nearby or can't set up the computer all day. They're a little more mobile and active. And for those jobs, there are a plethora of apps and settings for smartphones and tablets that improve accessibility for people with varying disabilities. So I'm going to talk about some of those. On all of your Android and iPhone or Apple phones and tablets, as well as to a lesser extent, maybe on your Amazon tablets or your Windows tablets. There are settings which will speak the information that's on the screen. You can change the text, background colors, font for easier viewing, and magnify the text and icons. You can read a document that's sent to you or scanned in through your camera out loud. You can use the camera app or external apps to recognize the text in an image. So if you take a picture with your phone, it can read that to you, or someone sends you a PDF, for example. You can also use the phone or tablet to identify currency, colors, signs, objects, and even people in some apps if you program them ahead of time, so that when the camera is pointed at that individual, it will verbally or on the screen identify who that is. They can also be used through the built-in Maps apps or through other specially designed apps to provide detailed navigation information, more so outdoors, but they are working on improving indoor navigation as well. You can also use apps on the phone or the built-in apps such as FaceTime to connect remotely for assistance. I'll discuss that a little bit later. Right now, I'm going to break it down into, for example, apps and settings that help people who are deaf or hearing impaired. Built-in functions include providing amplification, and the ability to adjust frequencies for each individual's needs as we age. For example, sometimes we lose our higher frequency hearing or lower frequency hearing. The apps and the phones and tablets can adjust that. They can instantly translate speech from the microphone into on-screen text, and also speak aloud text that is typed in. So that can facilitate communication between a deaf individual who does use print and a hearing individual. The apps can recognize common sounds like a dog barking or a doorbell and provide a visual alert on the screen to let someone who is deaf know that has occurred. There are also, by the way, settings to computers like in Microsoft Windows, for example, to alert someone to any sound that might a system sound on the computer. There are apps, both free and paid. The free ones have volunteers, the paid ones have more professionally trained people, which allow a deaf individual to connect in real time to an ASL or American Sign Language translator, so that they can communicate in that way, as well as apps to facilitate communication over telephone or over networks in the same way between hearing and deaf individuals. So the next category I'm going to talk about are apps and settings that are of benefit to people with cognitive and learning disabilities. There are apps which allow the creation of detailed schedules and reminders that can include video, audio, or text and images. As we were talking about earlier, for someone who is on the job and has trouble remembering where they're supposed to be when, what time they're supposed to be into work, they can create a reminder with an image of the door they're supposed to go in, for example. Whatever works for them, or with audio clips, videos, whatever. Also, similar apps are available to create customized details for instructions on how to complete a task step by step. You can have a video display, you can have a audio instructions, you can have images. So whatever works for that individual to help them remember what order to do things in. By the way, an added benefit is, in this day and age, it's commonplace for anyone to have a phone or a tablet, so it doesn't draw special attention to someone with a disability and point them out as someone who is deaf, necessarily accessing or needing special assistance. There are apps can be used either, like I explained before, through FaceTime, or specific apps to help connect employees with their job coach, with their supervisor, so that the person doesn't have to have someone standing there the whole time. There are apps specifically designed to create a panic button for an individual who's working, who just is not sure what to do next, is confused and is getting a little worried and scared. There's an app that you just click on it and it automatically calls the preset number, whether that's your supervisor or whoever it might be. The next category that I am going to talk about are apps and settings for people with mobility or dexterity challenges. There is a setting on Apple and Android phones and tablets to help to remove or reduce the amount of movement needed to reach all corners of the tablet or screen, to kind of bring things closer so that a person with dexterity issues doesn't have to try to move all over to get to them. On the Apple products, it's called Assistive Touch. I'm not sure what it's called on Android, but I know it exists. As we discussed earlier, predictive text is built in, so that when someone is typing on their tablet, as they get partway through a word, some possible options will pop up on the screen to indicate what they might be typing. And so the word will be completed and they just tap that word instead of having to type the whole word in. Voice to text can be used both to dictate into your phone to make emails, notes, reminders, that kind of thing. And also even to operate the device. So there are settings built into the devices where you can operate them just with your voice and not even have to touch the screen. And for people with more mobility limitations, there are ways to even control tablets and iPhones using switches, joysticks, sip and puff devices, or by simply moving their head or their eyes to indicate where they want to be on the screen and what action they want to take. Finally, I'm going to talk about some apps and settings that help people with all different disabilities, including those of us who have challenges that we don't even recognize as disabilities. As you all know, you can use tablets or your phone to schedule transportation through Lyft or Uber, for example, and then get alerts when the vehicle arrives. So, if you aren't able to watch out your window all the time, whether you don't have time or whether you're not able, the app will tell you when your ride is there, and that's very helpful. You can order your lunch or other items delivered to you, which for those of us who can't drive is definitely a benefit. For us, also for those of us who don't have the time. Communicate with people of all abilities through video, speech, and text, or any combination thereof. And again, that facilitates all of us in multiple different ways to communicate with each other. And that is the only other thing I have to add, is that keeping in mind that I think we already mentioned that no accommodation is going to be right for everyone. So it's very important to check with the person themselves to see what's worked for them in the past, and try things and kind of have an open mind about trial and error and kind of go on it like an adventure. And I think that's all I have to say.
Does anyone have any questions for Lisa or for Dan? All right, next we have Dr. Joe Todd to talk about some native programs.
Hi, I'd like to echo when you hear Lisa talking about that. Remember the old saying, there's an app for that? Well, generally there is. There is an app for that. So what I'd like to talk about is basically some of the built-in stuff that you have here. So by the way, I am a vendor for the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, and I also am a trainer for the Michigan Department of Education Low Incidence Outreach. So talking about the accommodations that we have as far as computers and iPhones and tablets and stuff like that, what do we have that's built in? That's the slide that's up there now. Now, just a real quick note, when I was going through my program at Western Michigan, one of the professors said the statistics show that if you're thinking this is going to cost you a lot as an employer, the typical accommodation for people with disability is $500 or less. So we're not talking about a lot of cost outlay. So just wanted to put that in there. Now, the first thing for built-in, so we're going to talk about the Windows PC. So Narrator is a text-to-speech program that comes in it's been there since Windows 7 and Windows 8, but it's really been well developed in Windows 10 and Windows 11. So basically, your employee can come up, do a simple keystroke, and they can use their PC right off, either with magnification, with their built-in magnification program, or with, having the screen read to them. And that is a nice thing to use, so you don't have to go get a special computer and spend a lot of money on the stuff to have access. The other nice thing is Narrator is particularly well suited for all type of Microsoft Office applications, as you would expect it would be. Then that's the magnification that you have there. So if you need have an employee that just needs a little bit, or it doesn't need a bunch of accommodations to see the screen, that's an excellent program. Again, a built-in program that anybody in the Windows 10, Windows 11 environment can use. And now the third one is VoiceOver and Zoom on the Mac or your iPhone or your tablet. That Apple had been doing this for a long time, and these are well-designed programs. Just they're native. So if you happen to use Mac in your environment, it's very adaptable. And as Lisa was saying, having a phone there and being able to call on some of the apps that are made specifically for people that are blind or low vision, it makes it a great tool. Gives you a lot of access to stuff that you need to do. So on the second slide here, we're talking about programs that you actually are third-party programs. Now, the first one is JAWS, or Job Access with Speech. That's a program that's been there since the DOS days. If any of you guys are as old as I am, and I won't say how old because that's embarrassing, and you remember the DOS days when you actually had to type in commands to get something to get done, you can see how long that's been in process. Now, some I know I've worked with some employees are saying, I don't know about this. Is it going to break my system? Is it going to open me up to security risk? Well, let me tell you, two large companies, Marriott, I'm sure a lot of us heard of that company, and Disney actually use JAWS in their environment. The other thing is a lot of state and federal agencies are using that program as well, along with their other product, which is ZoomText. ZoomText is for those people who need magnification. The difference between that and the magnification feature that you find on the Windows P or on the Mac is that it's much more granular in how you can set colors, how you can, the font that you see, you can change the program to be active, some in one function in one part of the day. And if your eyes are getting tired, you can change that to go with the better accommodation in the latter part of the day. And it's really there for those people who don't need full speech, but they need just a little bit of reading. So, excellent program. The third product, Fusion, is from the same company. This is Freedom Scientific. And that program was designed, let's say you have an environment where you have maybe 2 or 3 employees. One person needs magnification, one person needs maybe full speed. And the nice thing about that, for one price, you have all 3 products together. So they can run ZoomText separately, they can run JAWS, or if they need, they're kind of in between sidelines, they can use what they call the Fusion, which gives you both of those functions. The third one, the fourth one I'm talking about is non-visual desktop access. This is an open source product, meaning that it's developed by volunteers, programmers, and it has a wonderful price tag. It doesn't cost you anything, okay? Because it is a volunteer project. Now, some companies, which I can understand, are a little reluctant to use that because it's open source. How do I know this is any good? How do I know it's not going to cause a problem? Well, it's open source. So depending on your resources, your IT department can look at the code and decide whether that's a product that you want to use. So as you can see, you've got a lot of options there, some free, some that are paid. Let me put in a plug for the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. The people that go through that, or make advantages of that agency, as Dan will tell you, they have a counselor that's working with them. A lot of times when I get referred a client, it's me working with them, getting their skills down, and you will find that those people are excellent because they've really been worked on. You have a process where we can look at the work environment and see what we can structure for you guys. So you're not out there all on your own. And just let's talk about it. If you have an employee, particularly with blindness, low vision, the unemployment rate is 70%, and that's been pretty consistent throughout. We'd like it to be better. So if you've got an employee that you're considering and can meet your job, then I've been a director before. My biggest headache was having to train new people. You're usually going to find that a very stable employee, because if it's been designed, they're comfortable, it's just going to be a stable environment. So thank you.
All right, so again, we wanted to share some resources with you. You've heard a little bit about these agencies throughout the program here. So Michigan Rehabilitation Services, a great resource for people who are seeking employment, but also for employers. Bureau of Services for Blind Persons also does a lot of vocational work, but obviously their focus is for people who are blind or low vision. And then your local centers for independent living. So Disability Advocates of Kent County, Disability Network of West Michigan. We all serve a different range of counties, but there is a Center for Independent Living serving every county in the state of Michigan. So if you wanted to look up which one serves you, and it's not listed here, you could look at the Disability Network Michigan website, and it would tell you which one serves your area. West Michigan Works, the Great Lakes ADA Center. If you have technical questions about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA Center is a very, very good resource. And then the Job Accommodation Network. They provide a ton of information. They have lots of different resources and have worked with a lot of different scenarios for job accommodations. So they're a great resource for you to use as well. And then we just wanted to end today with a call to action. So I think Trina has that.
Yeah, so now that we've given you all of the resources necessary to hire people with disabilities, that is our call to action. We encourage people with disabilities. We want you to encourage people with disabilities to apply, just like we do with veterans and other minority populations. Create that policy that will make your company more disability friendly. Train your staff from every level, entry level, direct supervisors, even the executives, about the awareness of hiring people with disabilities. So, sorry, my magnifier here. So then making sure that your job descriptions, so we're really just reiterating everything that we've already gone over and Carolyn highlighted so well. Just making sure that your job descriptions are accurate so you don't lose out on that great candidate who just doesn't apply because they can't lift 50 pounds for administrative assistant position. Don't hire people with disabilities because it's the right thing to do. Do it because they are the best fit for the job. Remember, it's not about what makes us who we are. It's about the skills and abilities being brought to the workforce. So always remember, we are here for you. You are welcome to contact any of us on the DART team now or in the future. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all for being here. Any questions for anyone or comments that you'd like to provide?
Looking in the chat here to see if there's any questions. Charlene says, thank you everyone for coming. Please stay tuned for our hiring event in October. Also, please fill out the survey link that she has in the chat here. Yeah. I don't See anybody with their hand raised for any questions in the chat?
Thank you, Carolyn, for being here. We really appreciate your insight. You're doing great things. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to participate in this.
Yeah. Loved having you. It was great.